they're out in a more country setting. And I'm not going to talk to you guys about urban NIT when I don't feel like I'm the expert on that. So that's why I invited a good friend of mine and former grad to this program, Jamil. So he's going to tell you about his work and how amazing work he does. So a round of applause for my friend.
Keep clapping, I gotta grab something. All right, thank you guys. In an effort to manage any anxiety that I have some papers to keep in my hand, and I am going to reference them, and because these are my far away glasses, I'm going to take those off also. So, I have known Heidi for, I would say now, about 5 years. And I can honestly say one of the most endearing people to me. A good definition of love, this is not on my notes, so y'all just gotta bear with me. But a good definition of love, I believe, is the phrase committed to provide. Moms and dads are committed to provide for their children, parents committed to provide for one another. It's love in action. Anytime I've called Heidi, she's been there. So whether she knows it or not, I know she loves it. So I titled today's little talk, Nature-Informed Therapy in Action. As Heidi said, I do a lot of work with urban populations. I wonder why that is. But I find that the challenges are significant, and they're going to run across the board. They're myths, misinformation. And so the program that I've developed, I believe, successfully addresses all of that. So I just wanted to talk very briefly about who I am, what my organization is, what it looks like in real time, what we do and how it works, and then how maybe you can glean some things from that. So if you guys will bear with me, we will just get started. So I say nature-informed therapy in action because if you think about it, at least for me, what most of us do with nature-informed therapy is actually nature-assisted therapy. We go out into nature, we run our programs in the environment. What Heidi, I believe, and what I was able to pick up and glean from is encouraging and training us to do is actually move to nature-informed therapy. Looking at nature and allowing nature to inform us in how we can interact with our clients. I think that's one of the biggest differences. So, as Heidi said, my name is Jamil. I am a certified Maryland Master Naturalist, certified youth mental health first aider, certified Chesapeake Bay landscape professional, which is basically environmental conservation landscaping, a certified Baltimore weed warrior, and a soon-to-be certified nature-informed therapist. Now, this is, I'm stumbling because in today's society, we have to be careful of some things that we say. So I hope everyone, I don't want to offend anyone, but I would like a little bit of grace to speak freely out of my experience. If I do step on a toe, please, you can let me know later, we can talk. I don't mean anything by that. But in addition to all of those certifications, what's very, very vitally important, especially to the urban population, I also identify as a Christian. That matters to me because growing up, I dealt with a lot of childhood trauma. I will say several people did several things that people shouldn't do. We'll just leave it at that, right? But growing up in a time when we didn't talk about mental health and nobody went outside, it was just kind of get over it, deal with it. And so I grew up, especially as those things started manifesting, just feeling like I was a horrible person. It was not until I stumbled into nature that I started really experiencing some change. And so I didn't grow up being a nature lover. That's basically what I'm trying to say. I had a backyard, I climbed trees, I picked crayfish, played in the creek, did all the boy stuff. But I wouldn't have considered myself a nature lover until I had the worst camping trip of my life. My son he's in Boy Scouts. It's affiliated with our church. And so I've been at that church at that point for about 20 years. I know everybody. So when they say take these papers home and you need to sign them and get them back, I don't need to do that. It's special. So we get to the campsite And I'm so special that they allow me to sign the papers there. But the third page needs to be signed by my doctor, that I don't have any infectious, but I'm camping with my son, but he's with us as the Boy Scout, so you can't spend the night here. So I drove down the road about 10 minutes, found a campsite, got there right before they closed. This is late November, early December, so by 7:30 it's dark. It had started drizzling. So needless to say, trying to put up a tent, start a fire at the night when it's raining and it's cold, and he has all of my gear, was very, very difficult. In addition to that, I didn't sleep well because outside of my tent all night, I heard this. Now in the morning, I saw, even though it was drizzling, that there were leaves because it's late fall. So dry leaves crackling. To this day, I'm convinced it was Sasquatch. I'm still convinced Bigfoot was outside of my tent. But what I realized after that was I got to work the next morning on Monday. As soon as I walked into the office, I'm the only one there. And I started feeling tight and stressful and tense. And I'm like, well, I didn't feel this way when Sasquatch was outside. Like, what's going on? So a little research between outdoors and mental health. And eventually here we are. So that's kind of my origin superhero story. So who is Yieldcamp? My organization is called Yieldcamp. We're an mental health nonprofit, but we promote and provide environmental conservation and stewardship as a mental health self-care wellness technique or tool. That came about right when I met Heidi. I started an organization because now that I figured out that it wasn't Sasquatch and how to light a fire in the rain, let me take some other folks camping and provide the things that they need so that the financial burden isn't there. They have someone who has a little experience, but they can see all of the wonderful things that I experienced. Then COVID happened. So like most of us, I had to pivot. But I noticed something during COVID, that getting outdoors was one of the only acceptable ways to get together. I also noticed that a lot of people were doing volunteer work. And as I did a little research, I saw that a lot of the things that stewardship and volunteer work does, reducing blood pressure, sense of belonging, nature does also. So I said, hey, let's blend the two. And so that's where the conservation stewardship piece comes in. Conservation stewardship is a combination, I'm skipping around a little bit, forgive me, but it's a combination of environmental conservation, volunteer work, and nature interpretation, what Heidi's going to be talking about later with metaphors and use of metaphors. Those three things combined, we believe, have shown that they maximize, for lack of a better word, nature-informed therapy, because it's actually allowing nature to inform the therapy. So how that looks for us, conservation is what we do from everything from, let's say, I'll have pop-up events that we'll go and pick up trash in the neighborhoods in the community. Some who are a little more skilled or adapt to nature will go and actually remove vines and things off of some trees. We'll even do some tree plantings. That forces a connection, literally. One of the things that we struggle with trying to do is how do we foster a connection? But if I actually have to touch it and be with it, but then I don't have to worry about how to foster the connection. The stewardship piece, as I said, it just kind of mimics what nature already does. So adding those two things together supercharges it. And the interpretation, I believe, what I wrote down here was it helps to establish self-awareness. It helps with cognitive stimulation, and it also helps with a sense of empowerment. The more we begin to know about the ecology, and I believe I heard Heidi say she has some sheets that her naturalist friends have put together about certain trees and plants in the meadow. The more specifically we know about those things, the better we can interpret, because now I can see attributes of myself in nature that I can relate to. Something I think a lot of us may have heard before is the fact that, or the metaphor of we're a tree, we have roots and our body is the trunk, and okay, so you guys have kind of heard something similar. Mm-hmm. So as I started to learn the ecology, I said, I don't think that does it justice. We're not the trees, we're actually the forest, because none of us have one attribute. We're all made up of many different things. If I walk into a forest, parts of the forest are beautiful, strong. Other parts, not so much. Kind of like me, kind of like that. So, but then I can even contradict myself, or I will, because it's not even that we're the forest per se, but I see now that we're the land that these trees, these attributes grow out of. And so as we do the conservation, it's able to drive that point home because we're interacting with the landscape. It also helps to develop a sense of empathy. Now, these are all things that we try or have been tried with me and others in therapy to kind of get our clients and customers to develop. Here's a way that it kind of happens naturally. So how does this work in real time? I want to give you 4 little quick stories about what I've been doing, and then I'll pick that back up to close. So, one, in April, Yieldcamp spent 6 weeks leading a cohort workforce development group in Annapolis, young men and women recently released from incarceration. They were in a program with wraparound services, but they wanted job training. On day 1, we had an individual who was wholly irritated because we're doing stormwater development. So it was funny to me, but it was also serious because he could not understand what we were talking about between pervious and impervious surfaces. Couldn't get it. And when I said, well, one filters and one, you mean the blacktop? Just say that. Like, he was very upset. Why are we going through all these extra words? That same young man called me last night, almost in tears, thanking me because we have another project. He loved the work so much. We were only together for 6 weeks. There was another young lady in the group who ran up to, the day after her graduation, a random person on the street. I'm a landscape professional, just being. And so to see a group that's kind of, let's show up on day 1 so we can get a job, to when can we do this again? One of them even said to me, I don't care if we got to volunteer, I just want to be out there. It blew my mind. Right now, the same organization asked Yieldcamp to manage a house for them with some people that just trying to get a leg up. And one of the things I told them, talking about nature-informed therapy, biophilic design, we need to put some things into the house to bring nature indoors. I'm working on letting them put a garden in the back, things of that nature. But some of the lessons that we've extracted from nature become house rules and house principles. One of the things that we talk about in our conservation as we're removing vines is how vines can represent challenges, addictions, and things of that nature. So whether you're doing a window cut or you're pulling it out at the root, those are techniques that you have to put into your life to deal with whatever challenges those are. But it's looking at how we care for nature with those best practices and then developing a strategy that we can do in our own lives. Third, quick example, we're working on converting a 1 acre rectangular plot of lands, overgrown, natural wooded area, into a small neighborhood trail. This is the project that the young man is so excited on that starts tomorrow. So we get to do some invasive removal, we get to do some pruning, we get to do some trail creation, but all of those are ironically techniques that I'm going to try to get them to see that that's also how you rebuild yourself. So it's like a 7-step process that we're going through to get this trail done. First, we come in on the last 3. So, and I thought about this yesterday, my son was talking about it, or I was talking about it to him. I'm sure he loved that. But the first thing that happened was the sergeant of the American Legion, Gunning, saw that he wanted something to change. Then second thing was he was able to envision what he wanted that to look like. The third thing he did was he designed it. He actually sketched it out. And then he consulted someone. That's when he called me. Now, after the consult, we have to remove the trash. We have to create the space or do demolition, cut down what we need to cut down, and then we can build. And so as I was thinking about it, nature informing therapy, that's also how the process I had to go through in order to change things in my life. I had to see a change was needed. I had to see what I wanted to be after the change. Had to design a way to get there, come up with some steps, call someone like Heidi, hey, do these steps make sense? Then let's start removing the trash, get all the stuff out the way that's gonna stop that growth, the anger, the addiction, whatever that is. Now we have to start laying the foundation and then we can start rebuilding that person. So that's kind of nature-informed therapy. We stop, we look, we see what's happening, what do we need to do, what's the process, how does that work for me? Because we're all interconnected, and I think that's the best way to prove that level of interconnection. And the last quick example, and it was on Heidi's screen, pop-ups. I mentioned trash and debris. Sometimes Yieldcamp will show up with a tent, gloves, bags, and grabbers, and whoever shows up to pick up trash, we pick up trash. I call it a 5-minute get it challenge. For 5 minutes, if you see it, get it. When you come back, tell me how you feel. So the reason I think this works in a lot of urban settings is because all of us, whether it's mandated, whether it's because of school, whether it's a group, whether it's leadership building, team building, there's always opportunities for volunteer work. And so if you are pitching it to, let's say, my son's class, if I say, let's go on a nature hike, boom. Let's spend an hour getting some stuff you need done for your college credits. Okay, still in the environment. And nature does the work anyway. So it's really just about how do we get into nature and then keep them there for a long period of time. We don't have to necessarily focus on, I'm taking them into the woods. The other thing that the pop-ups do is they kind of change the narrative of what nature is, because nature is everywhere. If I'm doing a pop-up here in the garage and picking up trash that people have thrown out of their cars on the street, we're not in the deep woods. We're not in the park. It's not in bringing up that fear and trauma that some folks have, but we're still in the environment. And so we can start to change how they see nature and start to dispel that myth. And as most things in life, once you experience it, you get comfortable with it, you're ready to take the next step. So now the group that started the cohort that just wanted a job, now they're like, when can you take us camping? When can we go fishing? Have you guys ever been fishing? Ain't never been on a boat, but they're ready to go, which is wild to me. But it shows, I think, the progression and the beauty of how powerful nature-informed therapy can be. So what have I learned from my experiences? 4 things. Some I've alluded to already. Nature just works, period. Whether you know it's working or not, whether you know how to make it work or not. And so for me, a lot of my comfort is coming from the fact that I no longer look at myself as leading a hike. I'm always the co-leader. I'm off, nature leads. I also have developed, the second thing I've learned is the ability to lead from the rear. And so I was on a hike leading a group, so I thought, and I had myself and the other guy, we had maybe 2 or 3 invitations. We went, sit spot and 5 senses meditation, like we were really gonna make a difference, right? And so 2 minutes into it, very loud, very disruptive. One of the gentlemen says, oh, look at the spider web. 30 seconds, oh, here's another spot. 5 minutes into our walk, he spotted 6 spider webs. And now he's got 3 people with him. That's a third of the group. So now what do? I stepped back, got my phone, started Googling spider webs. Because that was their connection. I don't want to get caught into the, nope, you're doing it wrong. This is not how you love nature. Come on. Like, if that's what you guys want to do, fine. So as their curiosity had them there, I found out that spiders actually, as they're spinning their web, release chemicals at different parts of the web, so that to whatever it is they're looking for, to them it looks like a flower or a leaf or something that would attract them. So then I come back to the group and I say, spiders can hunt. Right now I know what I'm talking about. What they're actually doing is, but I just felt like letting them figure out what they want to do and just leaning into that is sometimes a lot more effective. And so now I'll show up with 5 or 6 invitations or activities, and they stay in my back pocket until we need them, or until someone touches on that. But leading from the rear has become one of the best tools that we can do. Finding a way to lean into stewardship, because again, whether it's court mandated, school mandated, whether it builds the resume, finding ways to do outdoor stewardship. It doesn't have to be removing vines, it doesn't have to be removing trash. Listen, fishing is conservation. In Maryland, we have a proliferation of catfish. DNR says, come get them. If you're dealing with kids, DNR also says if you see the spotted lanternfly, squish it. Little boys love squishing bugs. And that's conservation. But again, you're in the environment, you're outdoors, you're in nature. Nature is doing the work. You're doubling down with the stewardship piece. But you don't have to head on deal with the, I don't like being outside. The focus is on something different, so they don't really pay attention to that aspect of it. The last thing that I've learned from this process, nature informed, is there are 4, I don't want to say personality types, but there are 4 life positions that all of us go through. And I basically, this is pretty deep for me, and I chuckle because this morning I realized at any given time we can be one of these plants. We're all at some point a tree, a shrub, an herbaceous weed is what they call it, or a vine. And when I look at the attributes of those things, trees offer provisions and protection. parents, leaders, guardians, and when you're operating in that, you're operating as a tree, right? Bushes, shrubs, offer habitat and cover, safety for birds and small game. So I don't know metaphorically what that would look like, but there's someone in our life, in our sphere, that you cover, whether it's through advice, wisdom, whatever the case may be. What we call weeds are actually one of the most beneficial vegetations in nature. That's what just about everything eats. Those herbaceous plants that grow on the ground that we try to get the round off to get rid of. But those are the nurturers because they provide the sustenance. There's someone in your life that you are a nurturer for, right? And then vines, to me, because of how they grow and how restrictive they represent authority, because authority is the one that tries to keep us in line. And so what was wild to me is, to my son, I'm the complete forest. I'm protection, provision, I'm cover, I'm restrictions, I'm nourishment. But to my girlfriend, or to Heidi, I'm one. So back in the beginning when I said we're not just the tree, we're the entire forest, that's the metaphor and the nature interpretation to see what nature is and figure out how we can resonate with that. A lot of the guys I hike with, or we go, they'll see a distressed tree that's growing at the top, that resonates with everybody. I mean, people get emotional every time. But then when we take about 100 yards and we see a tree that looks perfect, well, what part of your life is perfect? Is your friendship with your best friend perfect? Is your, whatever it is, because they're so, and then people are like, oh, wow. So yeah, I'm more than just that beat up tree. That's just one component of who you are. And that allows, again, a connection. No one goes to visit things they're not connected to, right? So however they connect is going to get them to go back and visit. And so that's what I try to do with the interpretation and those packets that Heidi gives you that has those specifics. I think that's the benefit, because now you can start to hone in on the personalities and the characteristics of some of these plants. I even talk to guys sometimes because I remember at times feeling like I was useless, good for nothing, X, Y, and Z. But do you realize that a fallen tree supports different life species than a living tree? So usually when we fall, our distress comes from it no longer looks like it was. And so since it doesn't look like it used to look, I think I'm no longer valuable. You're valuable to a whole new ecosystem now. And now when guys, they're like, oh, wow. Like the guys that are in group homes I deal with, sometimes they're in such a rush to get out because they don't realize how valuable they are collectively in that moment. I heard a young lady on the radio, of all places, who said, all life starts in darkness. Seems like that's pretty more. But then as I thought about it and as she talked, seeds in the ground, butterflies in the chrysalis, children in the womb, thoughts in the brain. Every thought starts in darkness. So when you're going through that dark place, here's where growth is going to begin. Cool fact about rocks. All soil comes from rocks. So I tell the guys that I deal with often, no matter how hard a situation is, it's ripe for soil to produce growth at some point. If all soil comes from rocks, and soil is where things grow, that has to mean too that inside that hard situation, that rock, is the nutrients that's needed once we can break it down for growth. So now when we're going through hard challenges, we have another level that we can use to help us get through it. I talked earlier about doing stormwater management. I talked to my team that stormwater, the flood waters, the runoff that we're trying to mitigate, that's trauma. If we can't stop it, it's going to destroy, wash away, wipe out, erode. We can't stop it completely, but the stormwater management practices allows us to use different techniques to capture it, slow it down, so we can manage it better. Still got to deal with it, but if I just have a blacktop in my house, I'm getting flooded every time. So maybe I'll divert it, maybe I'll plant something. What can we do metaphorically? But again, it's allowing what we do in nature during conservation to conform or inform how we can do these things in our own personal life as well. I am wrapping up, but I wanted to get to this last, so what I do, I call what we do at Yieldcamp wellness informed environmental conservation. And a couple of things that you guys can do, I believe. Heidi actually stole a little of my thunder in her earlier presentation. But one thing that I like was when we go out, or you're venturing to go out, is to ask people, whether you're in a park, being forced or in a parking lot, to ask people a word that either they identify with or they want to be seen as. And then you look for that word in nature, that representation. It's usually resilience, strength, consistency, but those things are present. Another way to foster connection. Providing service, community service, we talked about. I'm going to throw this out there to you guys. If you have a client that's interested or willing to go to a park and pick up some things while you guys are talking, is anybody willing to say, hey, you show me proof that you did this for 30 minutes during the week, next week is 20% off. Getting them to involve in their own self-care. And now you're increasing the time that they're there. They may not see it as nature is good, but they see saving $25 is good. And so that's the incentive, the carrot you give them, but whatever we have to do to get them into the environment. And so when we look at their challenges, how can I help them manage one of their challenges by using these techniques? And if it's simply take a walk, send me some pictures, take a picture of a plant, tell me what you learned, bring that back with you, we'll talk about it, $10 off. I know some people would do that because I need that $10 myself. And then finally, if you look up Leave No Trace principles, there's 7 things that they say we should do when in nature so that we minimize our impact. I'm not going to say what I interpret them to be for me, because I don't think that's the only interpretation for them. But those 7 Leave No Trace principles, and just Google Leave No Trace, it'll pop right up. You can, I think, easily see how they can be applied to our life. I joke when my mom sometimes will talk. She's like, "You still doing that outdoor stuff?" But I tell her, "I bet you would have wanted me to leave no trace when I lived in your house." Right? So things like that. But even when it's, there's that famous admiral that talks about the first thing you do is make your bed. That's leave no trace. When I come back in the room, it should look like I was never in the room. That's a way to bring nature indoors. And so those are just some little things to do. But I'd say I've seen that it works because of, as we alluded to, when we're doing the job training or we're doing the pop-ups, no one is focused on we're in nature. All of them hate bugs. Quick pro tip, picaridin, picaridin. I pronounced it first when I read it picaridin, and so in my mind, that's how I try to spell it. It's a lotion. I'm sure you can get it in different dispenses, but I have it in a little pump. It gives 10 to 14 hours of bug protection. So I led a camping trip a couple of weeks ago where all of them were sunny. I had on shorts, no socks, t-shirt. I'm good. I'm cool. So in a short period of time, I swear by it. But a lot of the urban population is going, I don't do bugs. So do something outside close to the office. Have them just put on a little insect repellent. They don't get bit. Next time we can go 50 yards further. Next time we can go there. In the urban population, if it's not your client, if it's not their parents, it's going to be the grandparent, the big mama of the crew. There is going to be a Protestant spiritual connection more than likely. There are tons of biblical references of nature. And when you look deeper into them, there are even things that God or the Bible interprets. There are verses about his love is as sweet as the honeycomb. So we can talk about, well, what does that mean? So even in the Black community, when they say, I don't do nature, that's not true, because you sing his eye is on the sparrow. I know you do. What does that mean? Let's go out, get the Maryland app, listen till you find a sparrow, and then what does that verse mean? That's where nature helped increase my love or understanding of Christianity. And that's where I see the science now showing up when I look at scripture. A lot of people say Christianity is a myth. Maybe. I'm not here to say that. But when I see Moses and them leaving Egypt, I see evidence of a volcano based on what was happening ecologically in the land. I know the Bible said it created Adam, and the first thing God did in the Bible, put Adam in the garden.